What's going on, guys? Busted6 here, back to our video, and today I'm here to do my NFL Week 14 predictions. I do apologize really quick for sounding a little bit nasally. My allergies got stuffed up yet again, and again, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather because this weather sucks. So I do apologize for that, and if I start sneezing randomly, again, I do apologize for it. So Week 13 just passed, kind of an interesting but a weird week, as per usual. Some of these teams have playoff contentions. Others they're just to not get fined, I guess. So this coming week, there's quite a bit of divisional matchups, but there's going to be some games of our time in this week. So without further ado, let's get into the predictions. Starting off with the Thursday night game tonight, which oh oh boy. Um, we have the New England Patriots versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh boy, oh boy. So okay, Pittsburgh or not Pittsburgh, New England came off of a horrible game against the Chargers where Chargers scored 6 points and nothing else. I mean, granted, the defense was actually doing pretty solid, but my God, that offense is horrible, absolutely horrible, and their QB situation is an absolute mess at this point. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh, they came off of a very, very, very long weather delayed game against the Cardinals where they lost to Arizona. So, yeah, I don't know what the hell is going on there. So, it doesn't help that Katie Pickett's out of the game. So, we're going to have an epic clash of Bailey Zappi versus Mitch Trubisky. God help us all, please. I'm going to have Pittsburgh win only because I think their defense is a little bit stronger, and I guess the offense is all right, but oh God, this game's going to be pretty bad. This is going to be a pretty bad game. And coming off of a really good game last week in Seattle and Dallas, Al Michaels, I'm willing to bet, is going to be regretting after signing a new contract with Amazon Prime. So, yeah, I'm going to have Pittsburgh go over New England here. So then we go to the Sunday games. We have an FC North matchup between the Detroit Lions and the Chicago Bears. The Lions coming off an impressive victory over the Saints, even though their defense wasn't helping them at all. Offense was very, very, very good last week. Again, the defense could be a lot better. Meanwhile, the Bears coming off of a fresh bye week after having a game that happened on Monday against the Vikings where somehow the offense and the defense managed to somehow do okay against the Vikings and they shockingly got a victory there. Now, this is happening in Soldier Field, and the last time that these guys played, the Bears were actually winning against the Lions, but the Lions ultimately won in the end. I don't think it will happen again this time. I'm going to go with the Lions with this one. I just hope that we don't have another Minnesota Vikings from last year's situation on our hands where Lions have really good stats, but for some reason you can't help but feel in the back of your mind they aren't beating opponents that they should be beating easily. So I'm going to go with the Lions on this one. Following that, you have the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Cleveland Browns. Jags fans, I'm so sorry. After losing a pretty heartbreaking game against the Bengals on Monday, not only did you lose the game, you also lost Christian Kirk, and you also lost Trevor Lawrence. Further cementing that the football gods hate us this season. Now, I don't think it's all in turmoil for the Jacksonville Jaguar fans. Their defense was doing pretty solid, and their offense was showing up, but unfortunately, they couldn't get the job done against Jake Browning and the Bengals. They do have a good offense, but just sometimes that defense just needs to show up, and especially the offense occasionally needs to show up. Meanwhile, the Browns, well, they tried last week, signing Joe Flacco, who did okay, I guess, against the Rams, even though he did throw an interception late in the game. Their defense is still pretty good, even though Myles Garrett is banged up. And their offense is a little inconsistent at points. And the problem with Cleveland mainly it's just the injuries have been ruining this team. Not only did they lose Nick Chubb, they also lost Deshaun Watson. And just the QB situation is all but turmoil. And yet somehow you know it's a little bad when Joe Flacco is the least worst QB in your entire system. So this could be an interesting game. I'm ultimately going to go with Cleveland on this one, only because I think their defense is going to stop that run game. But who knows? Maybe Jacksonville might put in Nathan Rourke, which would be a better um, which would be a better selection than C.J. Beathard, in my personal opinion, because Rourke did great in the preseason. But who knows? Maybe Jacksonville will be able to pull off, but I'm going to go with the Browns on this one. Following that, you have an NFC South showdown between the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints. The Panthers came off of a pretty close game against the Bucs, even though they are obviously tanking, despite the fact they don't have their first overall pick. Bryce Young looks so lost out there. And it's kind of sad, too, because I know this kid has potential. This guy has some potential. But my God, the O-line and the defense, absolutely horrible. And they're out of the playoffs officially. Meanwhile, the Saints, yeah, it's basically over for you guys. Somebody's going to win this. Somebody's going to win the South no matter how terrible they are. But my God, it's just hell for New Orleans at this point because Derek Carr, he's a walking freaking hospital at this point with a concussion, a hurt shoulder, and some other injury. This dude is going to turn into the next Drew Brees, and it's actually kind of sad. Not to mention, they still have the old core of 2018, and they really, really, really need new parts. With that being said, the Saints are still an all-in-all better roster than the Panthers, so I'm going to go with the Saints on this one, but sometimes you can't trust New Orleans, and I have a feeling you won't be able to trust them here, but I'm going to go with the Saints on this one. Following that, you have another NFC South showdown between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. The Bucs came off of a pretty close victory over the Carolina Panthers. Baker Mayfield isn't really the answer that they were looking for, but he's doing well enough to help win games. And man, you gotta give Mike Evans where credit is due. 10 seasons in a row where he has had he's had over 1,000 yards. You gotta give this man his flowers. And when he eventually does retire, there's no doubt that he will be in the Hall of Fame one day. Meanwhile, the Falcons, they came off one of the games of our time against the Jets. Oh, good Lord, I don't want to remember that game. That game was so bad. Where the defense was really good, but the offense just flat refused to do anything. If only they had a quarterback. Oh, well. I don't get it with the Falcons. Who's going to win? I guess nobody will. Because nobody wants to win this division. This division is absolutely terrible. I guess I'm going to go with the Falcons with this one, but Tampa Bay's defense is still pretty damn good. And so is the Falcons' defense, but I don't know. I guess Tampa's offense is a little weaker than Falcons, but I don't really know. I don't know, and I really don't care because it's the NFC South, and we're not supposed to care about it. So I'm going to go with the Falcons on this one. Following that, you have what could be a really good game if you think about it. You got the Indianapolis Colts versus the Cincinnati Bengals. The Colts are on a shockingly really good hot streak right now. They have the longest streak in the NFL right now, and I feel like not a lot of people are talking about it, which is pretty damn sad. They come up with a very, very, very weird game against the Titans where 2 block punts and then a pick 2. It was just a weird game through and through. Though Gardner Minshew, he's doing really, really, really solid. And, I mean, the Colts are in playoff contention, even though they really shouldn't be there. And I don't think anybody really expected them to be there as well. Meanwhile, the Bengals, hey, they got the job done against Jacksonville. And Jake Browning actually looked pretty damn good. Although, what we did learn from this past Monday, never let Tyler Boyd throw a football ever, ever, ever again. That was horrible. But in the end, Cincinnati got a pretty shocking win. And now this game could be pretty damn good if the cards fall right. Ultimately, though, I'm going to go with not Cincinnati. I'm going to go with the Colts on this one. Only because I think the Colts offense has a little more flash to it. And I think their defense is actually really, really, really solid. Just the problem is the Bengals' defense is pretty weak, in my opinion. They have a really solid offense, but just that defense needs a little bit of work. And their O-line can use some work, too. So I'm going to go with the Colts with this one. Following that, you have a game that could look pretty damn good as well. You have the Los Angeles Rams versus the Baltimore Ravens. The Rams came off with a pretty impressive victory against the Browns. Matthew Stafford looked like he never aged Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams were having a field day on that defense. And while it does suck, Cooper Cup ain't getting as much time on the field, mainly due to injuries. He is still doing pretty solid in his own right. Meanwhile, the Ravens came off a fresh bye week, and well, I guess the good thing about the Ravens is they are the only team that has a healthy quarterback. Lamar Jackson hasn't gotten hurt yet. Knock on wood on that, because he always tends to get hurt at the end of the season whenever he's doing good. Their offense and their defense is pretty damn good. It's just the injuries have been plaguing this team, but they're shockingly doing good, and they have contention to take the #1 seed in the AFC. So you got some good stuff there. I do like the Rams' chances here, but I'm going to go with Baltimore only because I think that defense is just a little bit stronger, and the Rams are shockingly in playoff contention, even though they're still kind of in a weird rebuild. They still look like playoff contenders, but I'm going to go with Baltimore with this one, just because they have a little bit of an edge over the Rams. Next up, you have the Houston Texans versus the New Jersey Jets. The Texans coming off a very important victory over the Broncos, snapping the Broncos' win streak. And in a game where, yeah, C.J. Stroud did get banged up a little bit, and thankfully he's okay. But unfortunately, Tank Dell got sacrificed to the football gods again, hence why the football gods hate us this year. But Derek Stingley's having a great year. Dameon Pierce, they can use him a little bit more, in my personal opinion. But that defense came in clutch at the very end, especially with that pick six in the end zone on Russell Wilson. And the Texans, they're making some noise in the AFC South. And if the cards fall in their favor, they can not only make the playoffs, but they could take the title away from Jacksonville, since Jacksonville is banged up to all hell and back. Meanwhile, the Jets, it's just purgatory for this team. They are an absolute hell. Just, God, Jesus. You know it's bad when somehow Zach Wilson doesn't even want to start for this team anymore. It's absolute turmoil for this team. Losing in an ugly game against the Falcons, where they got a safety, and that's basically the only good thing that came out of that game. It was an ugly game from start to finish. I don't think the Jets are winning this game, despite the fact they have a really good defense. The Texans are just an all really more concise and solid team. I don't think they'll have a problem with the Jets, unless the Jets defense managed to get a lot of pressure on Stroud. I'm going to go with the Texans on this one. Following that, you have an NFC West showdown. You have the Seattle Seahawks versus the San Francisco 49ers. The Seahawks coming off of a pretty close game against Dallas, which I didn't think, along with a lot of people, didn't think that game was going to be close at all. But shockingly, it was a really close game. Geno Smith did have a really good performance along with DK Metcalf, and that offense was really, really, really solid. But they did, unfortunately, lose in the very end. Meanwhile, San Fran, oh, good Lord, they are looking dominant yet again. It was like the 89 49ers never left. Like, this team is an absolute unit, laying waste to the Eagles. And not only did they get the revenge, but they got the revenge and back the trash talk as well, with Deebo Samuel talking trash after that NFC Championship game. Him, CMC, and Brock Purdy had a field day. Like, that game against Philly, Brock Purdy looked like prime Joe Montana in that game. It was absolutely insane. They demolished Philly left, right, and center. In a game where they actually weren't looking that good at the beginning, and then once that second quarter hit, everything clicked, and it was just free fall for the Eagles. And the last time that this team played, it was not good for Seattle, and unfortunately, it's going to be the same fate here. I'm going to go with the 49ers. Even though they don't have the best record, they're the best team in the NFL as of right now. And yeah, Seattle, you might want to clench those teeth. You might want to clench those cheeks, because it's going to be an ass whipping yet again. I'm going to go with the Niners with this one. Following that, you have the Minnesota Vikings versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Both these teams are coming off of a fresh bye week. Now, Minnesota, they came off of an ugly loss to the Bears, where Josh Dobbs, I don't know what the hell happened, but before that, he barely had any picks and he threw 3 interceptions in that game, which I don't know what the hell happened. But I'm willing to bet Minnesota fans are very, very, very pleased because they have Justin Jefferson coming back. Yay! We all love Jay Jettis. And their offense is really good. Just the problem is their QB situation is pretty rough right now. Meanwhile, they're taking on the Raiders, who again they're coming off from bye week as well, and they just previously had a really good showing against the Chiefs, but ultimately Kansas City was the better team in the outset of things. Who's gonna win this? I don't know because both teams are kind of in a weird spot right now where if they get on a winning streak, they can go into the playoffs. But so far, they're not out of the woods yet, but they're not in it either. I'm gonna go ultimately with the Raiders with this one, only because I think their defense is a little bit stronger with Max Crosby, and I think that with Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs lighting up the field, it might be a little too much for that Vikings defense. But it could be a pretty close game, all things considered. Hopefully, it's not that one Super Bowl where the Raiders just blew out the Vikings out of the water. But that was the '70s. That this is now. So I'm going to go with the Raiders on this one. Following that, you have an AFC West showdown. You have the Denver Broncos versus the Los Angeles Chargers. The Broncos came off with a pretty heartbreaking loss to the Texans, where they didn't look bad, but I felt like they could have won that game, but ultimately it didn't work in the very end. Now, Russell Wilson was looking good, despite the fact he threw 3 picks in that game. The offense and the defense is really starting to click, especially that defense. They're like Vance Joseph, he's starting to improve that defense more and more and more. Meanwhile, the Chargers, well, you won against New England, but at what cost? It was a horrible game from left, right, and center, where I don't even know. I'm shocked Brandon Staley even kept his job after this game. It was just horrible, 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 horrible football left, right, and center. And I'm shocked the Chargers even won that game. With that being said, I'm going to have the Broncos win only because they're a more consistent team. And they're looking like playoff contenders after looking pretty bad in the first couple games. So we'll have to see because the Chargers defense is really bad this year. And everyone's wanting to bring Staley's head on a silver platter, myself included, and I'm not even a Chargers fan. So I'm going to go with Denver on this one. Following that, oh, yes. An AFC showdown we've been waiting for. We've got the Buffalo Bills versus the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bills coming off of a very, very, very earned bye week after losing a heartbreaking fashion against Philly. A game where they needed to win that. Josh Allen, despite one bad pick, was amazing that entire game. The defense and offense played perfectly, but unfortunately it was all for naught since Philly got away with the win. Meanwhile, the Chiefs, you're starting to have a little bit of concern with that offense of yours. The Chiefs came off of a very, very, very close loss to the Packers. Or shockingly, the Chiefs looked like they didn't even want to win that game. Like they did not lead that game at any stretch of the imagination. And Green Bay was basically running all over them like they were on railroad tracks. And Patrick Mahomes is still doing good, but he's starting to have one of his more weaker seasons, along with Travis Kelce. Their offense has just been very flat. Even though their defense is great, it's banged up the hell and back. With Tranquil out with a concussion, Brian Clark had a brutal ankle injury, so on and so forth. And I'm shocked Isaiah Pacheco is still walking after some of the hits that he took. But all in all, the Chiefs still came up very close in the very end, but ultimately didn't pull the victory out. Now, this one could be very close. It could be one of two ways. The Chiefs pull out a very close victory, or Buffalo's going to win. Shockingly, I'm going to go with the Bills with this one. I just think their offense has gotten a lot better ever since Ken Dorsey got canned. And, again, Bills, they don't have an easy schedule. They have a very tough schedule coming up because after this, then they have Dallas, and then they have the Chargers, and I think they play the Patriots, which should be an easy win for them. And then they play the Dolphins at the very end. They have a tough schedule. If they want to be in the playoffs, they gotta play perfect. And that's why I think think they're going to do here. I just think the Chiefs' defense is a little banged up, and their offense is very, very, very rough. So I'm going to go with Buffalo with this, but this should be a really damn good game. And watch the refs get involved. And then NFC East showdown on Sunday Night Football. You got the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Dallas Cowboys. The Eagles came off of a brutal loss to the 49ers, where they just got ass blasted from left, right, and center. Jalen Hurts got taken out with a concussion. Marcus Mariota was in for a little bit. And it's just absolute hell for the Eagles. And while there is some bad on that game, there was some good in the outset things because they signed former Colts linebacker Shaq Leonard. So, and it's interesting too because he actually went to both Philly and Dallas, but he ultimately signed with Philly for about a year. So they're probably upgrading a little bit on that O-line. But man, that defense needs some work because it was looking great at the beginning, and now it's starting to slow down a little bit. Meanwhile, Dallas came off with a very impressive victory over the Seahawks. Dak Prescott, I was in denial at first, but he's starting to look like an MVP. The main problem why I wasn't putting Dak in the MVP caliber is because he'll have good stats, but it feels like a lot of the times it's just mainly his offense and defense doing most of the work. But in games, especially the first game against Philly and that game against Seattle, he's doing really, really, really damn good. Not to mention CeeDee Lamb had a really good game. Darren Bland got another pick. And while Tony Pollard has been pretty disappointing this year, he's still doing pretty damn solid. This game should be a very, very, very fun game. Sorry, Philly fans. I got to go with Dallas on this one, despite the fact I hate Dallas. I just think they just have a lot of momentum on their side. And, this is a bit irrelevant, but Mike McCarthy actually had to get surgery. So maybe Dan Quinn might be taking over for head coaching role, but we'll have to see. But I'm going to have to go with Dallas only because Philly's just banged up right now. And then for the one of two Monday Night Football games, you have the Green Bay Packers versus the New York Giants. The Packers came off of a very impressive victory over the Chiefs. Jordan Love, he looked like a prime Aaron Rodgers out there. He played flawlessly, no picks, almost damn near, a perfect game. And those dimes to Watson and Dobbs, chef's freaking kiss right there. And he came in clutch as well. And that defense is getting a little bit better. Joe Barry is really starting to improve that defense. And that offense has been really, really, really damn good. Meanwhile, the Giants, they came off of a bye week. And, yeah, it's just hell for them at this point. This year has not gone well for the Giants at all. And I didn't really think it was going to be going well at all for them at the beginning. And not to mention the starter, Tony DeVito. And, yeah, it's going to be kind of a pretty one-sided affair. I'm going to go with Green Bay with this one because the Giants, they really don't have anything. And the Packers have been on a pretty damn good win streak lately. So I'm going to go with the Packers with this one. And finally, we have the Tennessee Titans versus the Miami Dolphins. The Titans came off with a pretty ugly loss against the Colts. Even though that they, by all means, they should have won that game statistically. But in the end, they couldn't pull it out in the end. Will Levis is still doing pretty solid, though he's still having a little bit of growing pains. He's still doing pretty damn good. And him and DeAndre Hopkins, despite some spats on the sideline, they're starting to be a pretty fun duo. Meanwhile, the Dolphins, they laid waste to Washington in a game that was not even close. Tyreek Hill, I'm willing to bet he might break 2,000 yards this year. He just needs to have almost 600 yards in 5 games. I'm willing to bet he's going to be probably at least 150 in this game as well. Because him, Tua, Mostert, whoever, it's just a high-flying offense. And while a lot of people say, well, they're not beating teams over a 500 record, what do you want them to do? They're beating teams they should supposed to be beating. And they can have... they can be in contention for the number 1 seed in the AFC. Meanwhile, I'm going to go with the Dolphins. I just think they're just an overall better team. Even though they did lose Jalen Phillips in that game against the Jets, I still think they're going to be a really, really, really fun team to watch. And I think they're just going to be a hard team to beat. So I'm going to go with the Dolphins on So, folks, what do you guys think about these predictions? Let me know in the comment section below who you guys picked. Make sure you guys leave a like, leave a comment, tap the big subscribe button, and tap the bell so when I upload, you guys will be notified. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Most importantly, throw it hard. Talk to you guys next video. Peace out.